the impact is it's very severe. So it's come to a point I can only see my life in two parts, and that's the part before I developed this and the part after. My most severe symptoms were the erectile dysfunction, the genital numbness, which is, I think, the most distinct symptom, the broad distinct symptom of this syndrome, I'd say. For the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was also completely impotent. So none of it worked at all. I wouldn't budge. Which was very scary, of course. It's very delicate to talk about. It's very difficult to explain as well, because it sounds so utterly unbelievable. But that's exactly what happened. So it just shrank, and it's not like I jumped into a cold pool or something like that. It's like the tissue has lost all structural integrity, really. So it's something like that. And there are also a lot of visual changes. I lost all my libido as well, so I never get the urge anymore. And that's a very distinct difference for me, because it used to be the other way around. And this all happened in the span of a couple of days. So it just happened, and that's it. And it stuck with me for all those years.
Hello and welcome to the Moral Medicine channel. Today I'm very grateful to be joined by fellow sufferer and friend Joseph. Joseph, thank you so much for your coverage coming on our channel.
Hey Eric, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Joseph, you obviously have Post-Finasteride Syndrome, PFS for short, from having taken Palmetto, which is another endocrine disrupting compound. So Joseph, I wanted to start off by just asking you if you could very briefly explain when and why you decided to take Palmetto.
Yeah, sure. I started taking Palmetto at the beginning of 2019, and I took it for hair loss. Hair loss runs in the family. I have a twin brother who suffers from alopecia for quite some years now. So yeah, I took it upon myself to do something about it. Now I knew finasteride existed because I had been on minoxidil for like a decade or so. But I did go and see my dermatologist, but eventually I decided to do Palmetto. So I took that for a year, and then after a year, all hell broke loose, I guess.
Yeah. So how was the substance prescribed to you? What kind of safety information was presented to you? I don't think that you need a prescription for Palmetto.
No. It's not regulated, of course, so
Right.
there is no prescription. But as I said, I did go and see my dermatologist, and I asked her about this, about finasteride, I mean. And we discussed it, and I distinctly remember she said to me not to make a real problem out of a cosmetic one. So that was the only thing she said to me, and then we decided not to do it. But I just went online. At first, I went to the local health store because they got loads of supplements and Palmetto as well. It was not only Palmetto, by the way. It was like some kind of reductase complex, if you will, prostate complex, hair loss complex, something like that. Palmetto was the main ingredient, but there was other stuff in there, like PGM, and I'm not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly, but all kinds of stuff for the prostate and for hair loss, really. So I just went to the local health store and bought it, really, and that's it.
Yeah. So tell us about your experience taking Palmetto. So how long did you take it for, and when did you first start noticing that something was wrong?
Yeah, it was very subtle actually. So I took it for a year on and off. When I ran out of pills, I remember to buy some more, and maybe there was a couple of weeks between that. But for the better part of the year, I was on Palmetto. I didn't really notice anything at first, but in the coming months, I did notice distinct testicular ache. So it wasn't always there, but I started noticing it. It wasn't that severe, so I just forget about it, and just kept taking Palmetto, and that was about it. There was some other stuff, but it's very difficult to be sure if it's the saw Palmetto or not, but I remember that some of my reactions to stuff that happened was very peculiar. So I I remember I bought a car once, and I just broke out in tears for some reason. It was very weird. It's not usual to have that kind of reaction to something so simple like that, but it did happen to me, and I didn't know where that was coming from. But and as the time progressed near the end of the year, I was feeling worse and worse, but I couldn't really explain what it was actually. So that was about it. But besides the testicular ache and some kind of weird reactions, I didn't really have any problems on it. It wasn't doing anything for my hair as well, by the way. So
Yeah.
that was about it actually.
But the most pronounced symptom was an actual physical pain in your testicles.
Right.
Okay. Right. Got it.
It was distinct. It was there.
Okay. It was distinct. So what happened when you stopped taking saw Palmetto?
Well, it's a funny story because actually I developed more severe symptoms while I was still on the drug, on the compound. But it was the last day I took it, somewhere in the last days, I developed very severe physical symptoms in my genitals really. So I remember it was very numb. The tissue got all deformed, the veins started bulging, and this developed over the course of a couple of days. During those days, I visited my GP. I was very open about this. I just told him what had happened. On his advice, I stopped everything, every supplement I was taking. That was the only supplement I was taking, by the way. It wasn't anything else. That didn't really do anything, and eventually it started improving a bit. But that was the most severe. So the genital numbing and the shrinkage, if you will. So a lot of deformations happening there. And the numbness was very distinct as well. So it's not just, and I still have it till this day, so it's not just sexual numbness, if you will, like a lack of sensitivity, but also tactile sensitivity is lost. So if you caress it with your hands or with a feather, or I don't know, you can't feel it. So it's like it's been injected with an anesthetic. That's what it feels like. And it was very fast. So actually I woke up with it. I just noticed something wasn't feeling, I couldn't feel anything at all really. So, and you tend to notice these things. So I had that happening, and for the first 2 or 3 weeks, I was also completely impotent. So none of it worked at all. It wouldn't budge, which was very scary, of course. So that was the first things I noticed when I stopped it.
Yeah, it sounds awful. And Joseph, how long have you been off saw Palmetto now?
To this day, more than 4 years now. So it's been with me for 4 years, every single day. Yeah.
Yeah. And obviously I've spoken to you in detail about how this has impacted your life, but could you, for the audience, maybe just list all the symptoms that you still deal with to this day, almost half a decade after having stopped taking this compound?
Yeah, so I consider myself one of the lucky ones, really, if you can believe that, because a lot of PFS sufferers have a lot more symptoms going on. So mine are mostly sexual. Though in the first year, I also had some physical symptoms, like my beard started thinning out and losing pigmentation, which was very weird. It was also in winter, by the way. So it wasn't, because my doctor asked me, well, was it the summer, and that's maybe why the hair was, maybe thinning out a bit or something like that, but it wasn't the case. It was for the better part of a year that my beard lost density, which has restored, luckily. I also had some skin issues, but my most severe symptoms were the erectile dysfunction, the genital numbness, which is, I think, the most distinct symptom, the broad distinct symptom of this syndrome, I'd say, because genital numbness isn't typically correlated with things like anxiety or depression, especially not the lack of tactile sensation. That's very weird. And the shrinkage part is it's very delicate to to talk about. It's very difficult to explain as well because it sounds so utterly unbelievable, but that's exactly what happened. So it just shrank, and it's not like I jumped into a cold pool or something like that. It's like the tissue has lost all structural integrity, really. So it's something like that. And there are also a lot of visual changes. I lost all my libido as well, so I never get the urge anymore. I do sometimes have it, but it's very reactive. So only when someone initiates it, but never on my own accord. And that's a very distinct difference for me because it used to be the other way around. And this all happened in the span of a couple of days. So it just happened, and that's it. And it stuck with me for all those years. I did have a period where it improved a lot, and that was after a month or so after my first crash, if you will. I started improving. To a point where I considered myself cured, and even more, I'd say. I mean, I almost felt hypersexual, if you will. I felt really good, and then I remember it very well. It was just one day, and I I felt myself crashing. It's very weird to explain. It's like something was like turning in a switch flipping in my brain, and it flipped in my body as well, and I just shut off completely, and my symptoms were a lot more severe. So the numbness was even more severe. It was so severe that I went to the hospital and just asked for an MRI, just to have my back or some of my nerve checked, because this couldn't be happening. So yeah, I think those are my most severe symptoms. So especially the Jones.
Well, thank you very much for explaining that in detail for the audience, Joseph. I think it's important for the audience to note that these profound physical symptoms are not something that you just imagine in your head. And certainly there's no reason why any normal person would have any motive to lie about things like genital shrinkage. So I really appreciate your courage and your honesty there, Joseph. And I think it's really important that this issue starts to be taken seriously, and that the really ridiculous claims regarding hypochondria start to fade into the background, especially in light of courageous sufferers talking about profound physical changes that are extremely intimate in nature. So,
Yeah.
Joseph, I'd really appreciate it if you could describe the impact that PFS has had on your life. Obviously, I talk to you on a pretty regular basis, and we're both suffering very badly. And I think it would be very beneficial for the audience to hear about how this has had a devastating impact on your life.
Yeah, well, the impact is it's very severe. So it's come to a point I can only see my life in two parts, and that's the part before I developed this and the part after. And that's about it, and everything else is just pales in comparison. So and I've experienced a lot, but this takes the cake, if you will. So the impact is very severe. I developed a suicidal depression on it, which is very difficult to shake as well, because I've been in therapy for this, just to try and get a hold of this and try to handle this depression, but it's nearly impossible. I really tried. I did a lot of therapy, a lot of different therapies. I even on my own free will, I had myself institutionalized just to try and get some help. And you do all these things, and the symptoms are so relentless; they just never stop, never. And it comes to a point where you just become suicidal because it never leaves. Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to explain how hard it is. I mean, it's just all encompassing, life destroying, really. And it sounds so unbelievable that a silly supplement could do something like this. Even I didn't believe it at first. I mean, it took me 8 months before I realized it was even PFS. So I stopped taking the supplements, of course, but I just, yeah. And for the audience as well, I mean, the impact is very severe because my life before this was, pretty great, I'd say. I didn't have any issues, any health issues or any, it was just a normal life, really had a normal life. And then something like this comes along and it just shreds it to pieces, really. So, yeah.
Very well said, Joseph, and thank you for sharing that. And then finally, the last question is, do you feel like you had enough warning and information about the possible consequences of taking saw palmetto specifically to provide informed consent? Obviously, again, you don't
Obviously not.
prescribe it.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, so the information on Palmetto is, if you do go look for it online, is very, very slight. So there is very little information about it, almost no information. And when you do present with these symptoms with a clinician or your doctor, there's nothing they can do. So there's nothing really. That's what's so upsetting about it. So you're cast into hell, and then you see there's nothing.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the worst aspects of this. But thanks to brave sufferers like you stepping forward and sharing their stories, their testimony, we can start to change that. So thank you once again for coming on the channel. Joseph, to the audience, I'd appreciate it if you could donate to our research. Obviously, the PFS network have some very good leading research into PFS. And please also consider subscribing, liking, sharing this video, and giving any support that you can to our community, especially if you're a friend or a loved one of a sufferer. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you again, Joseph.
You're welcome.